Hello and welcome to this Tammy Dress sew along tutorial. This is so exciting because the Tammy Dress was the original tea towel dress that I created in 2022. And unlike the poly tea dress, the tea towel is featured at the skirt part of the dress, but obviously it's a pattern that doesn't actually require a tea towel. So if you want to put a fabric panel or you want to do it all in one fabric, then of course you can. But I do love to encourage upcycling. So if you've got your curtains, your bedding, your tablecloths, then maybe challenge yourself for this one. But what's even more amazing is that the armhole can accommodate a ruffle sleeve, a puff sleeve, or a bishop sleeve. And it's part of the sleeve extension pack, which works for both this dress and the poly tea dress. So if you want to grab that and change your sleeve, then maybe you can. Based on pattern tester feedback, this is a beginner pattern. To be honest, it's probably one of the easiest patterns to make. The only thing that might be a little bit more difficult is the bias binding neckline, but I will show you how to do that in this tutorial if you're more of a visual learner like myself. So just a few things before we get started. It is recommended that you choose your size based on the finished measurements rather than the body measurements. I have a 41-inch bust and I usually go for the size large, but I think if I wanted to make it a little bit more oversized, then I probably would size up to an extra large. But it is also recommended that if you want a perfect fit, then maybe make a little mock-up of the dress in some like cheap fabric. And I do actually have a tutorial on my YouTube channel about how to change the shoulder length and the waist length and all things like that. And if you're going to challenge yourself by patchworking, this is one of my recommended ways of doing it. So I usually do a line of stitching and I overlock. Don't know if you can see there. And it just keeps it really secure. And what I usually do is I create the big square of fabric and then I put the pattern piece on top. And then, even though I haven't done it with this one just yet, I usually put a few stitches at the seam line of my patchwork once it's been cut. That's because when you cut the shape, because you've cut the stitching, it will start to unravel. So go ahead and just secure it. Maybe with a bit of overlocking or just a little bit of stay stitching. And although the pattern for the Tammy dress comes with the ruffle sleeve, I'm actually going to be working on a order which is a puff sleeve. So I will be showing you how to do that. And if you want to learn how to do the ruffle sleeve, then head to my poly tea dress pattern sew along tutorial because that will show you how to do that. Very excited about this. So let's go ahead and find out what pattern pieces we need for this. For this pattern you will need a front bodice, a pair of sleeves, a front main skirt which I will discuss about measurements a little later, a pair of back bodices, a back main skirt and 2 pairs of pocket bags. In order to cut down on paper waste, some pattern pieces will need creating depending on your size. So you will need a ruffle hem and you will need 2 large rectangles which will form the skirt part of your dress. Again, please refer to page 6 for all measurements. You will also need 12mm double folded bias binding, and you need about 1.4 meters for sizes extra small to large, 1.6 meters for sizes extra large to 5XL. And there is a page in the instructions on how to make your own bias binding. It's really simple to do and it's really simple to attach to garments. Now let's print the pattern. If you are printing the pattern at home, print the test square page first, which is on page 1. Make sure scaling is turned off and the pattern needs to be printed at 100%. Please use the layout guide on page 8 and 9 to help assemble the pattern. If you are having scaling issues, sometimes even printing at 100% can come up with a smaller test square. Try opening and printing the document in browser rather than Adobe. This usually fixes the issue. Assemble and tape the pattern together by matching the letter number notches. Before starting, make sure that you have transferred all notches from your pattern pieces onto your fabric. First thing you want to do is finish the back bodice center seams in your desired manner. For me, I have overlocked both sides. With right sides together, begin pinning the longer seam of the back bodice pieces. Then, using a fabric marker or pin, measure 2 centimeters from the fabric sticking out, like I'm pointing out here. Then you want to sew the 1 centimeter seam allowance along the back seam up until this mark, so don't go beyond that point. And make sure you backstitch at this point to secure the stitching. Then you want to press open the seam and then fold the sticking out fabric under by 1.5 centimeters, and then you are going to want to press and pin in place. Pin and sew close to the folded edge, pivoting just below the back opening and back along the folded edge. Hopefully this video will help you. With right sides together, pin and sew the front and back bodice shoulder seams and side seams. Finish the seam allowances in your desired manner and press the seams open or towards the back of the garment. Mark the middle of the neckline with the middle of the bias binding tape. You can use the middle of the back bodices as a guideline for the bodice neckline. And then for the bias binding, I just fold it in half and put a clip or a pin in place. Unfold the bias binding and begin to pin one edge of it to the neckline edge, starting at the middle and then going around the neckline. Sew this with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. The loose ends of the bias binding will become ties to fasten the back of the dress. If you want, you can try on the bodice and cut the ties to the desired length. Then watch what I do here. So I fold the ends of the bias binding right sides together and sew a 5mm seam allowance. So I'm going to repeat it for the other side so you can really see what I'm doing here. Turn these right side out and then using a pencil, some scissors or anything, just try and poke out that end to get a really nice neat finish. Then once you've done that, you're going to use the creases on the bias binding as guides. So fold the bias tape over, enclosing the raw edge of the neckline, and then you're going to pin it in place. When you pin it, make sure you keep checking on the other side to make sure that the pin has gone through the bias binding. You don't want to miss any of the bias binding when you go ahead and sew it. Once you've pinned the neckline, you are going to pin the 2 loose ties. And then by starting at one end of the ties, you are going to sew a 7mm seam allowance. I honestly think that is probably the hardest part of the dress done, so give yourself a little pat on the back. Yeah! So for this sew along, we're actually going to work on the sleeves next. So grab both your sleeves and then you're going to sew along the shorter edge of both sleeves, right sides together. Finish and press the seams. Then we are going to turn the hem of the sleeve to the wrong side by 1 centimeter and press. Then fold the fabric again by 2 centimeters, press and pin into place. Stitch as close and as evenly to the fabric folded edge as possible, leaving a 5 centimeter opening. So to gather the sleeve head, we're going to use a long loose machine running stitch, approximately a length of 5 on the sewing machine, and sew 2 parallel lines of stitches about 5 millimeters away from the edge of your sleeve head. And we're going to gather from the front notch to the back notch. So your front notch is the 1 little slit and the back notch are the 2 little slits. Start and finish the gathering about 1.5 centimeters away from each end, leaving a couple of inches of loose thread to allow easy gathering. Slowly pull the thread ends and start to evenly distribute the gathers along the edge. Then grab your dress bodice and turn it wrong sides out, and then you're going to pin the raw edges of the sleeve to the armhole of the bodice. Make sure you match the underarm seam to the side seam of the dress. It is recommended to match the notches of the sleeve and the armhole before evenly gathering the sleeve. This may take a little bit of time, but it's fine. We've got time. Finish the seam allowance and press towards the sleeve. For me, I like to add the elastic at the very end, so we will be doing that. So before moving on, you need to finish the edges of the pocket bags and the side seams of the front and back main skirt pieces. Once you've done that, you need to measure 5 centimeters or 2 inches from the top of your front and back main skirt pieces. Use a fabric marker or a pin to mark this along the side seams. Then place a pocket bag along the side seam right sides together. Make sure it is aligned with the 5 centimeter mark you have just made on that side skirt. Pin and stitch in place with a 5 millimeter seam allowance, and then you want to repeat this for each side seam of the front and back skirt pieces. So all 4 pocket bags should be attached. Press the seam allowance towards the pocket, and then from the right side you're going to understitch by stitching close to the seam, catching the seam allowance underneath. So like what I'm doing here, I'm opening the pocket bag, pressing it, and then creating a line of stitching. And this helps to keep the pocket bag inside your dress. Once you've done that for all 4 sides, you're going to lay the front and back skirt pieces on top of each other, right sides together. Then just double check that the top and the bottom of the pocket bags are aligned. Pin and sew down the side seam, pivot at the pocket bag, sew around the curved edge, pivot again and stitch down towards the bottom of the skirt. Give that a good old press as well. Before we move on and gather the skirt pieces, if you are using a tea towel or fabric panel at the front, I do recommend that you mark the middle of the bodice and tea towel with a pin. That way the design will be centered after gathering. You can either gather along the top edge of the skirt pieces, or if you are cheeky like me, I am going to be using my gathering foot. So this is a foot that I bought from eBay, and I just attach it to my machine and it gathers the fabric for me. It's a little less controlled than manually gathering, but it does help speed up the process. And I am quite impatient, so yes. Then what you want to do is lay the gathered skirt on top of the bodice, right sides together. Start to pin the gathered edge to the bottom of the bodice piece, making sure to align the side seams of the bodice to the side seams of the skirt with the pockets. I usually pin the side seams first, then I pin the middles, and then I evenly distribute the fabric. Stitch in place using your regular stitch length, and then finish the seam and gently press the seam towards the bodice. Press the seam allowance only so that the gathers aren't flattened. Ah, we're nearly there. It's looking so good. With right sides together, pin and sew your ruffle hem piece along the shorter edge to create a large circle of fabric. And just double check that you're not twisting any of the fabric before sewing. Begin to gather along one of the longer edges of the ruffle hem. Pin to the bottom of the skirt, making sure the gathers are distributed equally. If you've made a patchwork ruffle hem piece, then here you can decide where you want the fabric to go on the front of your dress. Finish and press the seam only. Then to hem the dress, you're going to turn the fabric of the ruffled hem to the wrong side by 1 cm and press. Then fold the fabric again by 2 cm, press, and you can pin into place. Stitch as close and as evenly to the fabric folded edge as possible for a lovely, neat finish. Then the last thing we want to do is add the elastic to the puff sleeves. Measure your upper arm and cut the elastic to this measurement. Then before feeding it through the little channel, I mark 1/2 inch on each side of the elastic. And although I have made a 1/2 inch mark on each side of the elastic, I like to put the dress on and just double check how tight or how loose I want the puff sleeve to be. So go ahead, try it on and just pull the elastic or loosen the elastic to the way you want it. Feed the elastic through the hem you have created. Use a safety pin to help and make sure the elastic doesn't twist. Once you are happy with the length, you overlap the elastic and pin and sew a few rows of stitches just to keep it nice and secure. Then you're going to sew the gap closed by sewing close to the folded edge like you did before, making sure not to catch the elastic while sewing. And guess what, guys? You have made the most perfect snazzy dress. Well done. Thank you for watching this tutorial on how to make this snazzy Tammy dress pattern. If you would like to buy the pattern, you can find it on my website at AFRAYEDUpcycling.co.uk. You'll also see the sleeve extension pack, and there's actually a bundle offer, so if you buy the Tammy, the poly tee and the sleeve extension pack, it comes at a little bit of a cheaper price. If you do make anything with my patterns, then please do tag me or send me your photos through email or something like that, because I love seeing them. It's the whole reason why I'm doing this. And I also love to see what people make. So yeah, thank you so much. And if you want to check out my other patterns and tutorials, I will put them in the description below. But anyway, I will see you next time. Bye.